Welcome to the 2024 Traveller Mayday Mayday event. I'm your host, Frank Succardi from Cyborg Prime Games. My guest today is Bob Loftin of SAFCOcast, a Traveller online podcast. Hello, Bob. How are you today?
Hey, I'm good, Cyborg Prime.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us for this year's event.
Well, thanks for including our podcast on it, because we Jeff and I enjoy Mayday every year, and it's an honor to be asked to say a few words. So that's great.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you could join us, and I'm so glad you enjoy the event. It's been a pleasure to put it on.
Yeah, so, it's super fun.
Yeah, cool. So, Bob, tell us who are you and what do you do?
I just had this vision of the scene from The Jerk where he goes, "Who is Navin Johnson?" So I'm a guy who lives in the Dallas area. I'm a public librarian, and been gaming since the early '80s, I guess. And my partner on the podcast, Jeff Koenig, is an old high school classmate and friend. And unfortunately, Jeff's not able to be on today, but I told him I would do the best I could to represent the show as well as I can. So
awesome.
Yeah, but I've been gaming a while, and like a lot of people, I think, I left gaming for quite a long time, and kind of got back to it in late 2014, and I don't know. The rest is history, I suppose.
So you run. So now you run the Traveller podcast called SAFCOcast.
Yeah. So SAFCO, it's SAFCO cast. So it stands for Super Adventure Friends Company. So during one of our Traveller games, I think this is before we started the podcast. We'd had a few Traveller sessions, and the guys were thinking, you should form a company. The characters should form a company. And I'm like, okay, great. What's your company going to be called? And I'm pretty sure it was Jeff Koenig who said, "How about Super Adventure Friends?" And then somebody, I think, added "co," so it would sound like Safeco, the insurance company. And it sounded so fun and goofy. We just kept it as they kept it as the company name of their Traveller characters. And so sometime later, Jeff and I decided to start the podcast, and that I really kind of originally thought we would do it having different members of our gaming group on from time to time, but we haven't. But that's the reason I really named it SAFCOcast, because I thought maybe we would all be involved in it. And it's not like anybody has refused. I guess I've been kind of a jerk and not asked anybody else to be on.
It's all mine.
Well, part of it is that
people like it when you invite them.
They do, but Jeff and I, we just got into a rhythm on the show, and I didn't want to break that up at all.
I hear you.
Mm-hmm. And people seem to be responding to the show positively, especially since we changed to only Traveller, because initially we were just talking about gaming in general, mostly GURPS and Traveller, because that's what we were playing.
Mm-hmm.
But it became clear that most of our conversation was tending toward Traveller, because that's what I was running all the time. So I think around episode 15 or 16, something like that, we just made the official change that we were just a Traveller podcast. And for the most part, we've stopped talking about other games, and because I don't have time to run other games, so that's how it is.
How did you first get into gaming, and how did you find out about Traveller?
So I was, I think this happened probably the summer before 10th grade, I think. Um, I had some friends in the neighborhood who were already playing D&D, and I was a late comer to that. But eventually I got interested, and they invited me to play D&D. And so I started really enjoying that. And then one of the guys had the Traveller box set. And so I got a call one night, and hey, you want to play Traveller tonight? And I'm like, what's that? And I think they probably said it's like D&D, but it's science fiction. Okay, cool. So I went down. Two doors down is where we played. It was like it was just neighborhood kids, you know.
Right.
And so my friend Andy shows up with the box set, and it was so different than the AD&D books, you know. Like it was so sparse looking, and when you rolled up the characters, it's very different too. So it was just kind of fascinating, and so back in those days, we pretty much just played either AD&D or Traveller. We fooled around with some other games, like we played Gamma World and Boot Hill and Top Secret a few times.
Those are all
but
great games.
All super fun, right?
Yeah.
And when Andy refed, he refed Traveller, and he was a great Traveller ref. Very imaginative. He gamed with some older guys who were really into it. So I think he not only had a great imagination, but he also he just had the advantage of seeing how some older players used the game. So he had some idea how to run a sandbox at that point. And I think those were pretty much the two games we played until Champions came out in
Love Champions.
I think early 82 is when it came out, I think. And yeah, well, that's the first game that I knew about that you could actually design the character instead of rolling up the character.
Right.
So to us, that was fantastic. It's like, oh, design the character you want. And so
Using
the other cool,
like a point-buy system.
right. And it was, when it came out, it was a single book. It wasn't a huge rule book, but it was really quite thorough. And there were a few things that it left out from the superhero world, like it didn't have vehicles at that point and stuff like that. But you could run a full campaign with it for sure. And it was also cool because, yeah, your character could do all this crazy stuff and probably not die, which was also fun. So we started playing that a lot. And I think we've kind of put Traveller away for the most part. It seemed really kind of basic and primitive, you know. It didn't seem like it had that much to offer anymore.
Did you ever try hero version of hero version of Traveller?
I haven't, no. And I think I fiddled around with the hero system, with some other like non-supers versions, like when Fantasy Hero came out. I remember getting that and kind of struggling with it a little bit. Not like I was great at building characters, but I still, at that point, I think I just wasn't really that interested in that genre of game. So it was pretty much Champions from then until really until that 1992, right before my wife and I started grad school. I ran some D&D second edition for her and 3 friends who had never played, and we had a really good time with it. And then we went to grad school, and the campaign all ended, and that was 1992, I guess, 93, 92, something like that. And I didn't pick up really any gaming materials again until, I guess, 2014 probably. And what really prompted that was my friend William, who's in our group. He's our 5th edition D&D game master. He moved back here to town after being, living away for many years. And when William moved back, it's like, we should definitely try doing some gaming. So I wasn't into Traveller really at that point. I wanted to do something different. I was not interested in reffing D&D. So I had some familiarity with GURPS from when I was in college, or years slightly after college. And so I started running a GURPS cyberpunk game and got the guys together, and everybody seemed to really enjoy it a lot. And we were running that, and I don't know, I just had this sudden urge to get the old Traveller books. And so I ordered a box set off of eBay, and I would say none of the guys had ever played it before. And I'd only had one experience as a ref, which it's not that it didn't go well. It's just like I was like 15 or 16.
Yeah, right. You don't know what you don't know. Right.
I didn't know I didn't know how to handle things, right?
Sure.
So, and that's another story I'll tell you momentarily. But so I said, yeah, you guys want to try this? And they were all up for it. So we got together. 3 of us got together, or 3 of the guys and me got together. We rolled up characters, and then we started the campaign. And my original intent back then, which was late 2014, early 2015, I think, was to I was going to run like short campaigns. Like, okay, let's play 6 games of this, and then we'll do some GURPS, and then maybe we'll come back to this. I was going to rotate a lot of games in and out. But the Traveller campaign kind of took on a life of its own, and I didn't want to stop. And as much as I love my GURPS game, I didn't even want to go back to that, really, because it was going to take time away from the Traveller campaign. Like, I've never had a campaign that I felt like really kind of took off on its own like that, and I was just kind of riding the wave,
Yeah. So how did your players receive it? I mean, did they enjoy it? A lot of times people like they don't know what to do, or what can they do, or and they kind of get like choice paralysis. How did you guys avoid that? Sounds like you had a successful and fun campaign right off the bat.
We did. Well, so initially there were 3 players, Jeff and William and one of our other players, Randy. I'm trying to remember. I mean, I think they enjoyed it immediately, but I also think that it took a while for them to figure out how to play this game, because I think they had played other games besides D&D, but let's face it, if you've played like 90% D&D, then 90% you know how to fight. I had forgotten until I went and played in a couple of 5e games how much a bloodbath D&D is all the time. I mean, and that's not a criticism. It's about fighting mostly, I think. And I think that's the reason a lot of people kind of struggle with it as a system, because they you want more out of it, but like, let's face it, it's mostly about fighting monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it took the guys a little time to figure out how to play the game, but they were really great and open-minded about it. And I mean, there's so many differences. For instance, I feel like when we play Traveller, there's a lot less rolling of the dice. There's a lot more conversation and description of what they tell me what they're doing and asking questions and all of that. But there's just not nearly as much dice rolling.
Do you think that might be as a result of your maturity as a GM? Because I mean, for me, I do the same thing. I only make them roll when it's something's on the line.
It probably has something to do with that. I do think that trying to be like, I try to be very kind of, I don't know, self-evaluative as far as my games go. Like after every session, I write up the session, and then maybe at the same day or a day or two later, I write out some game master notes for that session, and really sit and reflect about it and what went well and how I could have done things differently.
Awesome.
But I think I put a lot more time and a lot more thought into being a game master now than I ever did when I was a teenager or in my early 20s. It was kind of just always then, I feel like, kind of throwing something together to play, and we always had a good time. But for some reason now, having a really good session means a lot to me, and that can be almost paralyzing, because like I want every session to be better than the one before it. And they're not going to all be like that, but they can all be pretty good. It also helps that they're just really good players, I'll try to get them into some sort of trouble that they're going to have to shoot their way out of. But they understand the game, and that doesn't really work that well in Traveller.
Mm-hmm.
And they learned early on, they understand that like ship combat is really expensive, if not expensive and deadly.
Yeah. So they avoid it.
They do, but I also throw a lot of things at them where that a lot of problem solving, and every game I look at each of the player characters, and I try to make sure each one of them has a chance to use a skill that they haven't used in a while, or maybe they haven't ever used, to try to make that skill valuable to them, and give their character a chance to shine each time. And it doesn't always work, but I'd say it often does. And so I think they kind of took to it, Jeff and I have talked about this a lot on our podcast, but I think the fact that there's no leveling at least in classic Traveller, there's also no real experience points. When we were kids, we thought that sucked. It's like, oh, your character never gets any better, et cetera, et cetera. Or when you see the rules for, every 4 years you can try to advance or whatever, it just seems terrible. But I know that for a referee, for me, it's been very freeing, because I don't have to worry about like, oh, the guys are going to get bored if they don't get to level up in 2 sessions or something. And I think it allows them to concentrate a little bit more on the game, and rather than experience points and improving their character and all that. So I don't really have an explanation, I think, of why it's gone well. I think it's just a combination of everything. I think I'm a better game master than I used to be, and I think they're better players probably than they've ever been, and it's really cool to be involved in a pastime that you actually get better in as you get older.
That's funny.
So yeah, but they're a great group, and they are hard to get into trouble. Like if I want them to have a fight, I've just got to throw the fight on top of them. They'll always, they're really good at using their technology and their skills and all of that. So
I don't think Classic had task chains or skill chains. But do you use them?
They had what? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Task chains. Like There's a in the more recent edition, like in Mongoose, a person can do their skill and get a bonus that they can pass on to the next person. Like Sensor Guy can, if he does good, he can pass on a bonus to the pilot or to the gunner or whatever, and help them out.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because there's nothing like that in Classic Traveller.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we kind of made it up on our own, because they're trying to figure out, how to accomplish some task, and it does make sense that, characters with complementary skills would be able to help. So I can't tell you exactly how I've done it, but it's been sort of, like, okay, well, look, if your character can make his electronics roll, then I'm going to give such and such a +1 to do this other thing, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's really great about.
It's kind of intuitive, to do that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think another thing I really like about our group is that they're very flexible as far as how I decide to rule or, whatever, adjudicate a situation. And there are times when they'll want to do something that's just straight up like, I don't know how to do this. This isn't in the books, and honestly, you shouldn't be able to do it, but I like it a lot, so I'll tell them, look, you can do this, but they understand that I don't want them doing it constantly. Like, here's the example. David had a character who he described it as a hand grenade in each hand, and he wanted to bite the pins out like Snake Plissken and then throw them both at the same time. And okay, there's not really any rule for, I think, for attacking twice with hand grenades. But it was a cool thing to want to do, and I knew that David wasn't going to be like, well, you let me throw 2 hand grenades last time. I want to do it every time, So I let him do it, and it was a fun thing to happen. And we've done a lot of things like that. Or if I'm just not sure how to do something, and I don't feel like spending a ton of time with the rule book. This happened in GURPS a few times. I'll spend a couple of minutes trying to find the rule. And if I can't, I'll just tell them, look, I don't want to waste 30 minutes trying to find this rule. Here's how we're going to do it this time. Don't expect it to work like this the next time. I'll figure it out after the game. So it's nice not to have a table full of rules attorneys. They get it. And so they've been great in both game systems for that.
Awesome. I had some players that wanted to run a still in their cargo bay. And I was like, okay, well, let's all learn about stills. And so we spent some session time, and we all learned about how much a barrel and there's all different kinds of sizes of barrels. They all have names. And then we figured out how much they hold and how much cargo space they're going to take. And we made an exercise. I was like, I'm not doing this on my own. If you guys want to run a still, you got to put some skin in the game.
Yeah, for sure. When you're running a game, how long do your sessions usually go?
About when I'm running it, about 4 hours.
Okay, so that's a little longer than we usually go. When we started playing GURPS, and I should really specify, I think we've only had 5 sessions of the Cyberpunk game, but they were each like at least 5-hour sessions. Like there were ones where we'd start at 7 p.m. and finish at 2 a.m. or something.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, we're getting older. That's not really working as well now. So initially with Traveller, like, I just decided I was I wanted to run shorter sessions, and
Yes.
I think that's helped me as a game master too, because
Yeah.
First of all, it means that like halfway through the session, I'm not exhausted and making bad decisions or not being able to keep up with things.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we'll reach a stopping point. And I'm like, okay, cool. This is where we're going to stop for today. And I can go home and like really look at what happened, and it's going to make the next thing better because I've got a chance to react to what they're doing and just kind of
Right, in like a smaller segmented way.
Yeah.
Or measured.
It rather than coming up with something on the fly that maybe isn't as good. While still we're playing for usually 2 to 3 hours, and I think that's about as much as anybody wants right now too. So it's been good.
Yeah, that's cool. I try to, when I'm GMing, I try to do like episodic adventures, kind of like self-contained. That would be you'd be able to finish in maybe between 1 and 3 sessions, usually 2 to 3.
It can be challenging, like because I've done there've been a couple of series of games where they're kind of like a quest, right? And so multiple sessions, and as the game master, by the time we were about halfway through that, I was like, I'm about ready to finish this up. Let's get on to something else. Like I'm going to figure out how to move this along a little bit faster and finish it up because sometimes the planet hopping gets a little old. It's like, oh, go to this planet and do this, and then I feel like I'm in a Marvel movie or something. It's kind of nice to have multiple sessions, on the same planet or in the same system too. That's they get to know that environment a little bit more, and I think it kind of it just makes the game universe a little bit more real.
Yeah, I think it's a richer experience for the players if each location they go to, they have a flavor for it. One place my players had to go, they had to have a government minder follow them everywhere. And it was annoying, nice. They had to do something clandestine, and they had a minder with them. So they're like, let's not go back funny. There.
when I hear people talking about doing stuff like that, I'm always amazed at like the ideas that Traveller refs come up with are great, and we enjoy our game a lot. And sometimes I think it's funny that like Jeff and I are the guys who have a podcast about Traveller because, we enjoy our campaign tremendously, but like I would never do an actual play on it or something. Like I don't think it's so good that like I should be inflicting it on anybody.
Well, I mentioned our games are 4 hours long, but they're actually 3 hours long, and there's a lot of swearing and inappropriate stuff that could not go on an actual live play.
Nice. Yeah, Jeff, like when we do the podcast, I try to make the point without like, I'm not trying to be like falsely modest or whatever. It's just, I read every day on Traveller Facebook and on Discord and whatnot. I see people coming up with just incredible ideas and really well-developed settings that they're really much better than mine. So when we do the podcast, that's why like the podcast it's not about our campaign, and it's not, we may give it like a session report or something, but it's not about what we're doing. The podcast really is just about the game in general, things that we've discovered about it, things we like about it, and what other people are doing with it. So that's why we've had some interviews over the years, but a typical episode, we'll have an intro. We'll talk about some cool things we saw on the internet for Traveller. We might have a topic that we talk about, like, I think we did at least multiple recordings about the way people get inspired to create their games. So the podcast isn't about us and our gaming group. It's about the game, and I think that might be why it's somewhat popular. I mean, we hadn't released an episode for a long time until this last month, and I think it's been up about 2 weeks, and it's been downloaded about 340 times now.
Wow.
So, yeah. I mean, that's so. We're not trying to make money at this. We're not trying to, have our faces recognized. Obviously, we don't do video. We're just doing it for fun, and it's nice to see that 350 unique users. These are like I can't remember what the stats are called, but they're like the stats that have gone through some filtering to try to weed out bots and stuff like that. So, about 350 legit downloads. And typically that's within the first 30 days, we'll have 300 or 400 downloads. And then over the next year or so, it might double. I think probably the most we've ever gotten so far. I think we have a couple of podcasts that have been downloaded over 1,200 times, like legit downloads, not re-downloads by the same people.
Right.
But I also know that there are plenty of Traveller players who don't listen to podcasts. It's not their thing, or maybe they listen to podcasts and they don't like ours. They like actual play podcast or whatever. So, that's fine too. I mean, we're not trying to be everything to everybody. We're just doing it for fun because Jeff and I like getting together and talking about Traveller. That's it.
What made you decide one day to, hey, I should start a podcast?
Oh, I do stuff like this compulsively.
Okay.
I had been running a freestyle skateboarding podcast for many years, and that was started almost on a whim too. I was talking to a couple of guys on Skype, and the conversation was so fun. This was a long time ago. This is probably 2011 maybe. And the conversation was really fun. I said, we should record these and just make them a podcast. And so the other two guys were up for it, and that's what we did. And I worked out some of the bugs of podcasting on that one. So even though not necessarily every SAFCOcast is the greatest recording you've ever heard, believe me, they could have been a lot worse. If you go back and listen to the freestyle podcast, the first few episodes, like the recording levels are all over the place. It's horrible. Because I was just figuring everything out.
Well, it's not easy.
No, and I don't want to get into like all the technical details of trying to get everybody's volume at about the same level, or running it through this or that process in Adobe Audition or whatever. But I think now we have a good system for the two of us and one or two guests to use that kind of helps us equalize the levels a bit and gets a really good recording for everybody. So I'm really pleased with it, and we just need to do more podcasts. That's it.
Yeah, they do sound great. One thing that maybe might help motivate you is something I've noticed is every time I put out a new video or a new podcast, I get a lot of hits to my back catalog.
Oh, that's cool. I don't have a I mean,
well, you do now. You got like 35 or how many episodes do you have?
We've got a back catalog. Yeah, the most recent one is 35, and it continues to get, like, whether or not we put anything out that's new, it continues to get downloads every month. But I know there were people who definitely thought, since we hadn't produced one since like, oh my God, like the previous April or something, they thought we were just done. And we absolutely aren't done. But neither one of us is making a living at this, and
right.
and things happen in life, and you get distracted, and
Right.
It seems like it'd be the easiest thing in the world to just get on and record ourselves talking, and for me, it kind of is. For Jeff, it's not, because Jeff's function, besides being a great co-host, Jeff really digs into what we're going to talk about. Like, if somebody sends us a product, for instance, and like a PDF that they want us to look at, and like, I'll look it over. Jeff will examine the thing quite well, or he's the one who will find an old Dragon magazine article about Traveller and really read the whole thing, whereas I'm not really as careful a reader about things like that. Like, my role on the show tends to be more like getting us together to talk and kind of just trying to keep the thing moving along. So it is a lot of work. I think more work for him than it is for me to get ready to record. Once we record, then it's actually super easy to edit this podcast, because I think we've gotten better about not just rambling on it. And also, we make it a point not to curse at all during the podcast. So
family friendly.
Yeah. And it kind of, I mean, I don't really worry about whether it's, the family's going to be listening to it or not. Part of it really is that I just don't like. Mark Miller is somebody who, like, I've always felt he tries to lift Traveller up, right? And so, like, I want the podcast to kind of, at least in that way, properly represent Mark's his creation. Traveller's not a game where it's like, oh, we've got somebody selling Traveller modules, and the cover has, the green woman with 3 boobs, and like, he doesn't take the low road,
right. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
just try to keep Traveller in a good light, presented in a good light. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. That's the goal. So that's what we do with the show. And I'm looking at our page right now, so I haven't really evaluated it for a while, but yeah, we did. The last episode was the interview with the Scoundrels of Brixton guys. And then before that, we hadn't done one since April 5th of last year, and that was the update on the Keith Fry Memorial game.
Oh.
We interviewed you.
Yeah, that stuff goes by really fast, man. I was trying to put out like videos all the time, but I don't like to put out anything that's unedited. And I like my stuff to look good and be edited. I mean, a lot of people just sit in front of the camera and there's jump cuts and people don't seem to care. And I guess I could do that, but I don't know.
Well, you care about what you're putting out, like.
But do I have to?
I'm real picky about our audio, and we don't really have a huge problem on our podcast anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But like probably 2 years ago, we recorded an episode of our skateboarding podcast, and one of the guests was not wearing microphones. And as soon as I started listening to it, I'm like, every time he's not speaking, there's an echo. He didn't have his microphones on.
Mm.
And I'm like, or his headphones, I'm sorry. And I never even published it. And my partner was like, oh, you just got to take his track and cut out all the parts where he's not talking. I'm like, yeah, I know that, but I don't want to do it. Like, that's a pain.
Yeah. Yeah, massive pain. I've had previous multi-track streams on the same track, and like I had to go through with the volume modulator and turn it up for them and turn it down for me, and then find where they're talking again and put it up, and then where I'm talking again, put it down. It's a freaking nightmare.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I produce our podcast at work too. I'm a public librarian, and so we have a monthly podcast at work, and I'm super finicky about that one too, with one exception. When we interview a guest, like a partner of our library system, and especially when we were having to do a lot of that stuff on Zoom, if they didn't have a good microphone or whatever, I didn't worry about it, because the point is to get them on the show, and we appreciate their time very much, and we appreciate their partnership. But if it's just my show, it's like I'm going to make sure it sounds as good as I can. We've had great feedback that really helped us from listeners. Like quite a long time ago, I got an email from somebody who said, "Hey, your volume levels are way too low." And when I checked in on the episodes he was talking about, I'm like, he's right. And I grabbed all of the episodes he was referring to, and I re-edited every one of them to make them just a little bit louder. So it was really helpful to hear that from a listener, because I think a lot of times people will just listen to something and they're like, "Oh, it's just the way it is," and they don't tell you. And like, well, we want it to sound good for you.
Right. Yeah. I have some people in my community that are really awesome, and they'll say, "Hey, your audio is not on," or "Hey, you're too loud," or whatever. During a live stream. I super appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's nice to have helpful, people out there giving you feedback.
Yeah, for sure.
So, do you have any particularly memorable interviews or episodes that stand out as your favorites?
So, let me look through them. I'm gonna bore you by looking through a list of them. So we started out with one that was a little bit about our gaming history, GURPS, Traveller, and we had been to a con recently, and then we did one about the North Texas RPG Con. So here, I hope I don't miss anybody, because I'm scrolling through this. We interviewed John Watts, who was then of Gypsy Knights Games. It's now Independence Games.
Mm-hmm.
But we interviewed John. That was a lot of fun. Let's see.
John's super friendly and very nice guy.
Good dude. Yeah. We interviewed Rob Eaglestone about his zine called X-Boat, which was really good. It was a Traveller 5 zine. We've talked to Greg Karras at least a couple of times, and you about Mayday and online gaming stuff, and Ken Patterson as well. And so it's always just fun to get people on the show and talk. And I don't know, they're all fun. We've done a few things where we ask listeners to submit content, like we did a thing where, tell us about the longest campaign you've ever run. And so after we'd had a month or two for people to submit ideas, we started talking about those, like a few in every episode, until we'd covered them. We've done some things like that, and those are always fun. I don't know if I've really got a favorite. It's just fun to do it all the time. And Jeff always comes up with, like, we call them the internet finds, just stuff we found on the internet about Traveller, and he always finds really cool stuff. And I enjoy talking about rules that I found in the classic Traveller, and then it turns out I didn't understand them at all, and like 2 episodes later I have to give a revision about how I didn't know what I was talking about, or didn't understand the rules or something. Looking through one of my favorites, like recently, was episode 32, was the one titled "Never Knife Fight Earl Doomerist." So like in the old, I think it's in the 1001 Characters book, at the back of the book, and also in Citizens of the Imperium, Mark wrote up a bunch of characters from science fiction literature, and it doesn't have names with them. You've kind of got to guess who they are, or actually he does publish them at some point, but in the books. But So the Doomer's novels, of course, are these sort of pulp science fiction adventures, and the hero Earl Doomer is just this totally competent, super badass who fights with what in Traveller would be called a blade, the 9 or 10 inch long knife. And so I really enjoyed talking about taking Mark's write-up of Earl and putting them in the arena for a knife fight against essentially anyone else, and how the other person will be dead within like 1 or 2 rounds at the most, and how it's impossible for them to even hit Earl. So that was fun. I've thought about getting Mark on the show, and he's super nice. I got a chance to just see him speak at a local con a few years ago. But he's been on so many different interview shows that I feel like I would just be forcing him to tell the same stuff over and over again. I don't know if I've got anything original to ask him, and that's the only reason I would want to get him on, is if I had some kind of really original question to ask him about Traveller. And there's just a lot of interviews with him out there, so I haven't done that. I haven't talked to Omer from Cepheus Deluxe and all of his stuff. I should probably get him on the show. And
they're all super friendly. Well, I put out an invitation that first year. I was surprised. Number one, I was surprised Mark Miller joined me on the first year. We only had 4 interviews, and his is one of them. And Omer too has been here since our first Mayday.
Yeah.
They're super friendly, and they like to talk about Traveller and stuff. Just put your own spin on it and get a list of questions together, and I'm sure you can get some of those guys at least to come on your show. Everybody likes to talk about their Traveller stuff,
What I'd really like to talk to Mark about is his science fiction reading that he did in the years before he wrote Traveller and since then. Because I've been going through this book I've got, which is, I think it's actually called The Science Fiction of Traveller. It's a bibliography. And I've been reading a few of the books from there. And that's been a really fun project. And so, I wouldn't mind talking to Mark just about the science fiction that he enjoyed reading and things he liked about it and all of that. The other person I'd love to talk to, but I don't think he's that much into talking. My favorite Traveller and Cepheus engine creator, if we have to use the word creator these days, is Michael Brown, who does all the short, like quick and dirty Cepheus engine scenarios, and he's got to have at least 300 of them available on drive-through.
Yeah, awesome.
And I love his stuff. I love how creative he is. I just finished recently, even though I've got dozens of his products, I just finally ran one of them, and it was super good. But I think he likes to express himself through those products a lot more than he does talking or whatever, and that is absolutely fair play. But we like to mention him a lot on the show because his games typically only cost 99 cents or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so concise, and they're great. You can just pop them into your campaign usually, and they're just, I just love the way he does things. It made me want to do the same thing, and I'm like, I can't do this.
It's nice. It's nice to be inspired and to be the one, and also to be the person inspiring. So maybe he'll hear this interview, and that'll give him a good feeling that you feel that way.
Yeah, I hope he knows, because really, really great material, and everybody kind of contributes to Traveller in their own way. I think whether you're playing or game mastering or doing a podcast running Mayday or making videos like Seth, Seth Sikorsky. I just started watching his videos pretty recently, and I watched the one couple of them where he reviewed the old adventures from GDW, specifically Death Station and
Love Death Station.
I think the Chamax Plague. And well, I've got a bunch of these, and the thing I really liked about his video for Death Station, as well as Anik Nova, they're classic adventures, but I remember looking at these things when I was a teenager going, these suck. Like, what do you do with these? Well, he makes them come alive, and he compares them to the newer versions as well. But I think really, even after all this time, only after watching his video about Death Station did it dawn on me what a cool adventure it actually is and how much fun you could have with it. So, yeah, I'm still in the process of watching a lot of his stuff. So,
yeah, he's got a lot of great stuff, and he's an accomplished author. I think he does mystery or sci-fi books.
Yeah, something like that. I haven't had a chance to really explore that much yet, but I mean, this is why the podcast has been fun. Like, there's almost an infinite amount of stuff for Jeff and I to talk about.
Yeah.
It's just, and we could just go on and on about it, kind of like I'm doing right now.
Yeah, like we're doing right now. Let me ask you this: since you're a GM and you've played a few different systems like GURPS and Gamma World and Top Secret, whatnot, how do you think Traveller's game mechanics and world building compare with other tabletop RPGs for folks who might be familiar with D&D, for instance, but don't know anything about Traveller?
Yeah, so gosh, that's a big question. So I like to go back to what I've heard Mark say on multiple occasions, and he talks about the world creation rules from Traveller and rolling up the worlds, and how you get some pretty crazy results at times, and so I to kind of paraphrase what I've seen him say online and in person, he talks about how, like, if you just sat down to make up a new planet, you start running out of ideas kind of fast. Like, oh, I'll do an ice planet, and then I'll do a jungle planet, and so the thing about those rules, they kind of kickstart your imagination and almost force you to make sense of stuff that doesn't initially make sense. So that's really different, I think. As far as I feel like I may be an outlier in this respect, but I don't really use the Third Imperium setting. So when people start talking about details of the setting and is this or that canon and stuff like that, they lose me real fast.
Yeah, me too. I've always played in my own universe.
Yeah, and so I think it's great that all of that is available. But part of, I don't just like reffing the game. I like creating the stuff. That scratches my creative itch, and we even talked about this on one of our early podcast episodes. Even if the stuff I come up with doesn't look as good or isn't as good as a published setting, I'd still rather use my stuff because it's my stuff. That's really important to me. And I like to use the published materials and everything to get ideas, but I like to use my stuff, and my group hasn't had any problem with that at all. I don't know. Did you? I don't know if you listened to the RPG Ramblings podcast at all.
No.
I've been on that a couple of times, and Jeffrey, the host, and I were talking about this, and we were talking about that sort of desire to create your own thing versus use a published setting. And there's a lot of different reasons you would want to use a published setting. Maybe you don't have time. Maybe you just really like it. That's all great. But we were talking about it, especially with regard to kind of I don't want to stereotype too much, but like newer players who newer RPG players, not Traveller players necessarily, who they're really into the setting. Like they want to know everything about like whatever the D&D setting is that they use. They want to be so it's kind of like they're fans of the setting in addition to being players or game masters.
Yeah, they want to consume the lore.
Yes, and and so Jeffrey said that's the way he described it is, I think, they want to be sort of interacting with the meta, right? They like that. They want to consume the lore. They want to really know about it, and they want to insert themselves into it as players. Whereas it's not my thing, you know. I like to read the stuff, but like that's not what I want to do with my game. So I think Traveller allows for both ways really well, you know. Third Imperium's awesome. You can buy Pirates of Drynax and play that. Or you can do what I did, which was roll up a subsector, flesh out like 3 or 4 planets a little bit, and start your game. And that was fine. Because, like, I think for us, it doesn't really matter that much for our characters to know like what the Emperor's having for breakfast that morning.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
right.
What matters is, you know, whether
do you still have
an
empire, like a benevolent empire, or do you have something else?
Yeah, we still do. It's honestly, I don't think we've even really explored how benevolent it is, because the game is set out on the fringes of exploration, and they're pretty far removed from particularly important decisions and people, and they can cross the border into the unknown and be away from everything. So I don't know. We should probably explore that a little bit more. But I mean, we roll the characters up with we did it just with the 3 little black books. So, you know, there's like that. There's the assumption that there's like some sort of interstellar government. We have the Scout Service, we have the Navy, and all of that. We just don't worry about, you know, who the Emperor happens to be at this or that time, or any of the other kind of timeline stuff that's happened throughout Traveller, like was it called the virus and all that stuff?
Mm-hmm. Or the long night and things like that.
I don't worry too much about that, because we're just running little adventures and having a good time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Much more on a local level, and not so my players don't. I mean, there's Empire, but the Emperor protects what's his, and if you don't mess with it, then you never really see them.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the way we do things, and I think if anybody else listens to my show and Jeff's show, I'm sorry if I'm repeating stuff, but I think one thing that's different about the way I do things as a game master now than I used to is, especially with Traveller, is the non-player characters are really important now. Like, since I've got a group of players who don't kill everyone that they meet, you can actually have non-player characters come back and help them or thwart them or whatever. And so that makes it a lot of fun. There's a lot of loose ends at every session, and I make a list of loose ends. And if I'm trying to figure out something interesting to happen, I'll be like, oh, what if such and such showed up again? You know, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. Let's say you met somebody for the first time who was a friend and they were into sci-fi, but they had never played Traveller. What would you tell them to maybe get them involved, or at least get them interested to check it out?
Yeah, I think I might ask them if they'd ever played a role-playing game in general, so if they knew what it was, and I don't know. I think what I might do is just say, hey, check out my blog or something, because I write up all the games, and just talk to them about science fiction, because I've been reading a lot lately. It's kind of funny that you asked that, actually, because I'm really hesitant to bring new people into our group. Not out of just trying to be a jerk, but like it's a really good group. And so I've had guest players, and they understand that they're guest players for that session. And it's always worked out, but I'm even careful about who I invite, because I think our group is very friendly to everybody, but the truth is we've all known each other since at least high school, and in some cases
we just want to play with each other.
It's kind of true. Yeah, like it's. I mean, like I've played a little bit at cons, and I've run Traveller once at a con, and I had a good time with that. But I hear about people really struggling to, like, oh, I can't find a good group to play with, or I want to put together a new group. I want to run the game, and I can't figure out how to do this, or I can't find players. And I feel really bad for them, because that's not an issue for us at all. The biggest issue for us is, like with anything with adults, is getting everybody together at the same time.
Right. Yeah. Schedule management.
But it's there are some people in our area that I would love to play with, and I think they would do well in our group. But the other piece of that is our regular Traveller group, besides me, is 4 people, and we're playing in person. It's hard to get 4 people together, and then if you add a 5th or 6th person, it's really hard to get everybody together.
Yeah.
So that's an issue too.
Do you guys play weekly or bi-weekly, or just when can, or?
When can, like the goal is monthly, and we never make it. Like it's my goal for this year is to probably have 8 good sessions. Well, for one thing, William's running D&D 5th edition, and so that is the same group, but with William's wife and my wife playing also. And so we're having a great time with that. William runs a great game. And so, like, if we're going to play D&D one weekend, we're not going to play Traveller the same weekend. We need to get that group back together soon. We had a couple of games scheduled, then one of the guys got COVID, and we canceled for a while till he got well and all that. So I don't know. We don't stress out about it a whole lot. Like everybody else, I would love to play like every week, but I also don't want it to become like yet another point of stress in anybody's life. Like it's supposed to be something that's fun that we do, and it's easy to sort of make your pastimes into jobs, and then it starts to suck.
Yeah.
Unless that's where, like, I mean, I know you do stuff professionally with this. Like, I mean, you're making real stuff. I mean, but like this is just supposed to be something that's fun for us to do. And if somebody can't participate in our Traveller game, we're finally to the point now, I think, where it's like, well, if we're going to have one person gone, we're going to go ahead and play. Before that, for a long time, it was like everybody needs to be there, and we're not going to get stressed out if we have to cancel.
Yeah.
But now it's like, if one person's going to not be there, that's okay. We'll continue. And we just don't kill their character. That's it.
Right. Yeah. I'm playing in a group right now. If one person can't make it, that's okay. Two people can't make it, that's a cancel usually.
Yeah. How many people are in your group?
5, including the GM 6.
Yeah. So like you want to have them all there, and
Yeah.
I feel like for me, for Traveller, 4 people is kind of the magic number of players, because I can give each character the time and attention that I want them to have, without boring the hell out of everybody else while that's happening.
Right.
I mean, I've had as many as 6 at the table before, and that was a lot in Traveller. I felt like I felt like it suffered a little bit in that way. It's different. Like if you're playing D&D and it's like, oh well, we need 3 fighters and 1 cleric, and like you need everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody serves like a very specific function.
Right.
But in our game, like I like to be able to let everybody get their role playing in, really, and I don't really use the word story a lot, because it makes it feel like I've got like a predetermined ending in mind, and I don't.
Right.
But like I like whatever that character's life, I like to let it develop and have a chance to kind of become richer. Hard to do when I get over 4 people.
Yeah. It's hard to let everybody shine when there's a lot of people who need to shine.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but the nice thing about this group again is that like there's nobody who's constantly demanding of the spotlight.
Sure.
And that really became apparent in the last session we played. So William they're all great players. Something that William did, it kind of removed him from the action to some extent, but it was a really good idea. Like a lot of times he'll go off and like be the guy who's on lookout someplace, and it usually helps them. In this case, it really didn't help them, but it was still a good idea. And you could have a lot of players who'd be bummed. It's like, well, I didn't get to do anything. It's like, but William, it's like he's an adult and he's a good role-playing gamer. He's like, well, that's what I decided to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, Bob didn't jump through some hoop. It's like and invent a monster to come attack me out of nowhere, just to make something happen,
Right.
And so it's really nice to have players with that maturity level, and like their eyes are on like what's good for the entire group, not what's like making them feel happy during the game.
Right. Yeah, I have a similar experience with one of my players. He's the pilot. He's not the owner. He's part owner of the ship, but he also happens to be like a really super awesome pilot. And he wanted to stay back at the ship because they were worried about people attaching things to their ship while they're away and stuff like that. So, right. But he ended up just hanging out, similar kind of thing. And he just his character's an alcoholic, so he spent time mixing drinks and listening to music and monitoring the comms and the sensors to make sure that, he did stuff, but he wasn't directly involved in the adventure, and he was totally cool with it.
Yeah, that's great. It's nice to have players like that, and because it's hard enough to ref a game anyway, and then if your player does something that's actually smart but not going to be exciting, it's nice to know you're not going to have to just entertain them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a new GM to coming into Traveller? Like somebody starting off their first, a GM starting their first Traveller campaign, or a player.
Yeah, if I think for a game master, I would this is common. I didn't make this up. It's start small, because it can be kind of overwhelming when you start trying to create an entire subsector and trying to figure out what every planet does and all of that. And even if you're using a published setting, I would say start small, and I think that's probably decent advice for any role-playing game, whether it's this or D&D. Start small, and I feel like our campaign is less railroady than it used to be, but I think when you're starting a campaign, sometimes maybe you've got to be a little bit railroady to get something started, because part of Traveller that's very important is like that whole idea of a patron, right? And like, somebody approaches you in a bar and they need you to go steal something for whatever.
Okay.
You give the players the hook, right? And they can choose to do it or to not do it, but if everybody's at the table to have a good time, the players ought to take the freaking hook, and again, my friend William put this really well. I thought, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, it's a player's responsibility to interact with the world the GM's putting out there. And Jeff, I think Jeff and I have talked about this. I know I've talked about it with someone. Like, there's so much pressure I see like online for game masters to just be unbelievable game masters, right? Like there's videos about how to be a better game master, and you should be doing this and you should be doing that and all of that. It's like a lot of responsibilities on the players too. Like we kind of jokingly one time referred to like the unengaged player as a house plant. Like you don't want a table full of house plants. The players should engage with the game world, because that if they don't, like, what are you actually there for?
Mm-hmm.
And
you are a player, yes, and so you must play. Yes, good.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, go. Players take the hook. I think most people do. I mean, I'm kind of envisioning like a worst case scenario where, you've got people that just don't want to. But I think the thing is, like, when you see all the material that's online about how to be a good game master, there's so much pressure on game masters to just be really good. And it's like, look, the players aren't just there to be entertained, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're there to participate. You're there to play a game together, and the game master is also a player.
Yep.
And so every now and then I'll see something that's like, you know what? This person just wanted to be entertained, go watch a movie then.
Right. I think maybe a lot of people, they see like Matt Mercer or something, or I've seen people like on like the Roll20 forums saying, I'll GM a game for $5, and that gets you 4 or 5 hours of game time. And I'll take 4 people or whatever. And they're like, well, you better be like Matt Mercer, and I wouldn't spend $5. I mean, and the GM's like, look, I bought all these books. I spent all this time. It's earnest money to make sure you show up, and what else are you going to spend $5 on for 4 hours, So, I kind of,
right.
I can kind of relate. If people want to charge for it and they're doing it professionally, or they just want to break even or whatever, more power to them. If they that's a business deal between them and the people who are playing and they're doing business with. None of my business. And I'm just happy that there's more gaming going on in the world.
I can't imagine, for me, it would be an unbelievable amount of gall to charge somebody to play in one of my games, unless it was at a con or something where you're paying the con.
Mm-hmm.
But like I would never feel like I had met the expectation of someone to actually pay for it. Like, my friends are already, I mean, we're doing something for fun together.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that, like, when you turn it into an economic transaction, that really changes the dynamic to me.
Well, I've never paid to be in a game, and I've never charged anybody to be in a game. But I can understand why people do it. And, I don't have hatred for them. Is I guess what I'm saying.
No, not at all.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what makes people, kind of. You better have this high bar for my $5.
Oh yeah.
You better be Matt Mercer. It's like.
Oh yeah, it's funny.
on,
Like you'll see somebody like buy a gaming product online that was like. I've seen people complain about something that was literally free. Like it's some product and it's like pay what you want and zero is acceptable. You can get it for free. And then somebody it's like gripes about it. It's like it's free.
Yeah.
Like
what do you want for nothing? Your money back?
Really? Yeah, that's how I feel. The podcast is free, okay? So like I like it when people listen to the podcast, and so does Jeff. And we love the interaction with listeners. Like we love getting emails and everything. So far, we've never had any real hate mail. So that's been really nice too. But like I said, I know like not everybody likes to listen to podcasts, and that's okay too. Like some people prefer watching videos, and that's
sure.
That's fine.
So do you have any plans for upcoming episodes, or do you just kind of wing it as you go?
No, I've got some plans. I'm trying to remember what they are right now. There are plans. Like I've got a couple of recording sessions scheduled in the next for either the next 2 or the next 3 months, including this month. Are we talking to you? I think we're supposed to talk to you about Mayday too.
That'd be awesome.
We usually do, and that's always fun. We had to put this off. I was really excited about this, but I can't remember. Something came up, and I just couldn't do it that day. So we still are going to interview the legendary gaming artist Jeff D. Do you know Jeff?
No.
So, like, if you look at a bunch of those classic D&D modules, he did a bunch of the covers for those. He's the one of the 2 original creators of Villains and Vigilantes.
Oh, okay.
And he's just done massive amounts of role-playing game artwork over the years. He lives down in the Austin area. And I met him briefly at a con a few years ago, and I talked to him. He had come out with the newest version of Villains and Vigilantes, which I bought. And so I was talking briefly with him on Facebook, and it's not like we're pals or something where we talk all the time or something like that. But I had seen some thread on his page, and I asked him something about it, and we were talking. He says, "Hey, when can I come on your podcast?" And I'm like, anytime.
Tomorrow.
And I said, well, it's a Traveller podcast. And he said, I'm actually running Mongoose Traveller First Edition right now. And I thought that was amazing that Jeff D is running Mongoose Traveller First Edition. So I'm going to get Jeff on the show. It was a bummer to not be able to do it the weekend that we were planning to. Except that maybe I'll be better prepared this time,
Right.
It's more time to think about what I want to talk to him about, because he's done so much in gaming that it would be easy to just end up talking for 3 hours and not even talk about Traveller.
Right.
And I really want to stay focused on his thoughts on Traveller and science fiction gaming, and we can talk a little bit, about his art and all that. But I think that's probably been covered elsewhere. Like I really want to. Like, okay, why did you pick Mongoose Traveller First Edition? Because his system, Villains and Vigilantes 3.0, I think I've seen him running some sort of like really science fiction oriented campaign with it, I think. So I thought it's interesting that he's using that. So, I'd like to ask him a lot of questions that you've asked me, like, what's your history with Traveller, because this guy's got a long history. He and Jack Herman created Villains and Vigilantes when they were when he was a teenager. He was already publishing stuff when he was a teenager, and all that art. He was very young.
Wow.
So yeah. So definitely want to get him on, and just kind of more guests coming up, and that gives Jeff, not so much me, a break from doing so much research for each and every episode.
Right.
He's very busy. Like, he's got a really busy job right now.
Sure.
So that's
hey, well,
why.
invite me on anytime. I don't have anything for Jeff to look up, so it'll be easy.
We'll just talk about spaceships and stuff, right? Yeah. But well, when we started the podcast, I told him, look, if you ever decide that you just don't like doing it anymore or something, tell me. And he's never told me. Like, he's still fully into it. It's just,
That's awesome.
Work and life happen, and it's the way it is.
Yeah, cool. All right. So, are you on social media? Is there a place people can find you on TikTok or wherever?
the YouTubes.
On the YouTubes?
So the easiest way to find us is to go to SAFCOcast.com. That's Safeco with no E, SAFCOCAST.com. That's our website, and so you can actually listen to all of the stuff on the page. You can subscribe through Apple Podcasts. The RSS feed is posted there as well. You could just put the RSS feed in your podcast catcher. I just added a thing on there. Send a voice message to SafeCoCast using this thing called SpeakPipe, which just allows people to leave voice messages for us. And so hopefully we'll get some people using that. And on that page, there are links to our Facebook page and also to our Blue Sky page. We don't have a Discord because I decided there's plenty of Traveller Discords already. We don't need one for the podcast.
Sure.
We were on Twitter, but I got rid of the account because I didn't like it anymore. And so right now we're on there. We're also we are on Mastodon, and we're on dice.camp, which is a gaming related Mastodon instance. And our handle on there is just at SafeCoCast. And I'm as bad as anyone else. Like, I'm totally addicted to social media. I track this stuff like a lot. The only thing I've done recently is I removed Facebook and Instagram from my phone, and my life is so much better since I did that. It's so much easier to get some reading done when I don't have either of those two things on my phone.
I've been thinking about getting an Instagram account myself. I've never been on it, but a lot of I took a survey of my community, and a lot of folks are on it, so thinking about it.
Yeah, I think like for someone like you who like you actually have like a commercial business, and this is a thing that you do. I think it's probably really important to be on these platforms, and so people can find you and discover you and communicate with you and all that. For us, I mean, we don't even have a Patreon, so we're
time to get with the program.
Yeah, I'm like, well, everybody's got a Patreon, man, and I devote about $20 a month that I split up between people on Patreon, and sometimes I shift money around to different ones, and but I like, if I had a Patreon, I would, and I think Jeff would definitely feel like this. If we had one, we'd feel obligated to do a lot more episodes and stuff. It becomes, like, we have an obligation then. We don't just expect people to send us money because they like the episodes we did 4 years ago.
Right. It's like having an accountability partner for the gym, though. It's if you want motivation, it's kind of a way to do that.
No, that's a good point. I don't want any more motivation. I just want to do our podcast and have fun with it, and I hope people enjoy it. And like I said, we love it when people email us, and I love getting voicemails if people will use that. So, safecocast.com is where to find us. So
fantastic. All right. Well, it looks like we've wrapped up. We've come to the end of our little interview.
Cool. I hope I didn't bore everybody too bad, but thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I find you fascinating. Your stories and everything about Travelers seems parallel to mine, and we have a lot of common interests, like playing champions and things like that. So and also kind of our sounds like our GM styles are similar too. So that's cool.
Well, I think something that like I comes through on the podcast, I hope, is that we're just Traveller players.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're just regular guys playing Traveller and talking about it. And we're like, I try to avoid sort of giving advice, like, oh, here's what you should be doing. No, don't listen to me. Just look at the stuff we tell you to look at. Give people a little love out there on the internet. And that's what we're about. We're not trying to like influence somebody's play style or anything like that.
Right. All right, cool. Well,
all right, man.
We've been talking to Bob Loftin, co-host of SAFCOcast, along with Jeff Koenig, who could not make it today, but you're welcome anytime, Jeff. Come on to next year's, or we can always do an off year, an off schedule podcast. So
you got to get Jeff on. He's the best.
Like, people have been telling me, hey, you should do this on a quarterly basis, or you should do this, twice a year at least, or whatever. And so I'm thinking about it. We'll see. I have a lot of time on my hands.
People are, like, it's easy to tell other people to do stuff, though.
Yeah. Yeah. My guest today has been Bob Loftin of the SAFCOcast podcast. Thanks again, Bob. And thank you, dear listeners. Until next time, happy traveling. Don't fly solo through the galaxy. Click like to join our alliance. Subscribe for your crew pass, and enable notifications to never miss an encounter. This journey is fueled by my patrons. Thank you, patrons. Feel the thrill of discovery. Become a patron and join the adventure.